November 30th, 1948. John Bain Lyons, a jeweler near Adelaide, Australia, was taking a night stroll with his wife in Somerton Beach. As they walked the beach, they saw a man in a neat suit and perfectly polished shoes, his back on the sand, his head on the seawall, and his feet crossed. As they walked closer to the man, he raised his right hand weakly, only for it to quickly fall back down to the sand. Lyons dismissed it as a random act by a drunk man. Only 30 minutes later, at 7:30 p.m., a second couple were walking along the seawall and noticed the man in the same position. Peering at him from above, they noticed mosquitoes swarming the man's face. The boyfriend remarked that he must be dead to the world not to notice them. 11 hours later, Lyons would find himself in the same place, staring at the same man in the same position, only this time, the body was cold. Lyons had originally come back to the beach at 6:30 a.m. to meet his friend. He had noticed, though, that where the drunk man had laid the night before, a group of people were crowded around something, to which he investigated. Now realizing that the man was actually dead, the police were immediately summoned at approximately 6:30 a.m. The police report for the death read,
I beg to report that on the morning of the 1st of December, 1948, a man's body was found lying on the beach at Somerton, South Australia. There were no marks of violence on the body, and it appeared to be a case of suicide.
Within 3 hours of the encounter, the police had transported the body to Royal Adelaide Hospital. The man, still unidentified due to a lack of ID and identifiable dental records, had been found to be 5 foot 11 inches, 40 to 45 years old, and had many eerie aspects on him and his clothing. His clothing had all labels carefully removed, and an array of items were found on him. 2 small metal combs, a half-eaten pack of gum, a train ticket from Adelaide to Henley Beach, which would have been a 1-hour trip from the body's location, a bus ticket from Adelaide to Glenelg, the city Somerton Beach resides in, a pack of cigarettes with different brand cigarettes within, and a matchbox. The following autopsy would be done by Dr. John Barclay Bennett, who determined the cause of death to be heart failure just around 2 a.m. However, Dr. Bennett and other medical witnesses were all of the opinion that it was an unnatural death, though no traces of common poisons were found. For more information, John Matthew Dwyer, a government pathologist, would examine the body. During a deposition, Dwyer would describe his findings. Both lungs were dark with congestion, but otherwise normal. The spleen was strikingly large and firm, about 3 times the normal size. He would also explain the anomalies he found, though in all honesty, I didn't understand much of it, so here is a simplified version. All official documents are in the description. The throat was blocked, and there was some whitening and a sore spot in the throat lining. The stomach was excessively red and had some small bleeding underneath its lining. The second half of the tube connecting the stomach to the intestines was also blocked and red. There was blood mixed with the food in the stomach. Both kidneys were swollen, and the liver had too much blood in it. With all of these symptoms, a professor named Cedric Stanton Hicks informed the coroner of Adelaide, Thomas Cleland, of his suspicions. Digitalis or strophanthine, 2 poisons. Side effects of these poisons were stomach upset, small eye pupils, abnormal heartbeats, and death. But once again, no poisons were found, so this might not necessarily be true. Police reports would document that photographs and the fingerprints of the deceased were taken by the police and later circulated through English-speaking countries. But that would be to no avail, and this case would quickly fizzle out. For over 1 month, every lead that had been found had been dismissed. That was until January 12th, 1949, when detectives were sent to the Adelaide railway station. There, they found a suitcase that had been checked into a cloakroom on November 30th, the night of the Somerton man's death. The staff could not remember who had given them the suitcase, but its contents would be of curiosity. Articles found in the suitcase were a red checked dressing gown, pair of red slippers, pajamas, shaving gear, an electrician's screwdriver, a stenciling brush, and a table knife which had been cut down into a short and sharp instrument. There was no evidence of this being the man's suitcase, but that would also be proven true. Also found within the suitcase was an orange thread for sewing that was not available in Australia. Weirdly enough, this thread was the same that had been found to patch the dead man's clothing. Despite all tags being removed from clothing on the man himself, with the exception of the names T. Keane and Keane on a singlet, all name tabs had been removed from the garments. Even with this information, no T. Keane was found to be missing in any English-speaking countries. With all new information from items in his suitcase, the police were finally able to put together a list of his whereabouts throughout the 30th up until his death. The Somerton man arrived at the Adelaide railway station from Melbourne, Sydney, or Port Augusta. He showered and shaved at City Baths, a gym adjacent to the station, and purchased a ticket to Henley Beach that left at 10:50 a.m. But for some reason, he never boarded. He would go on to check his suitcase into the cloakroom where it was found and boarded a bus to Glenelg. He would then arrive at Somerton Beach sometime between 12 and 1 p.m., but that would be debatable. His whereabouts are unaccounted for up until 7 p.m., when our first witness placed him there. But once again, after this suitcase being found, the case would go cold. That was until a piece of paper was discovered in the man's suit jacket on June 9th, 1949. It read, "Tamam Shud." The piece of paper would be translated to, "It is ended" in Persian. It was cut out of a book called Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. This paper, though, had been ripped out of a very rare edition of the book, which kicked off an investigation nationwide to look for the missing book. And it wouldn't be long before it was located. Nearly 1 month later, a man had a strange story regarding his copy of the book. He was driving his car with his brother-in-law when his brother-in-law had somehow found the copy of the book in the back seat. Both assumed it belonged to the other, but neither was right. They put it in the glove box and it had been there ever since. When the piece of paper circulated the newspapers, the man brought it to the authorities, only to discover it matched the book that the Somerton man had taken a piece out of. The book would be of note, as it would hide some interesting secrets. The detective who was given the book found a phone number at the bottom of one of the pages, what he had thought to finally be a lead. The phone number would lead to Jessica Thompson, a nurse who lived 400 meters from where the body was found. She would go on to admit she had given the book to an Australian Army lieutenant named Alfred Boxall around 1945 to 1946. According to the Advertiser, the woman said that she subsequently went to live in Melbourne, where she was afterwards married. After her marriage, she received a letter from the man. She replied, telling him that she was now married. Sometime last year, she could not remember the month, she was told that a man had come to some flats next door to her home and inquired for a nurse. She did not know, however, whether this was the same man. It was after this incident that the body was found on the beach at Somerton, not far from the woman's home. Weirdly enough, however, it was found that Alfred Boxall still had his version of the book. This led investigators to wonder how the Somerton man had come in possession of his version of the book with Thompson's phone number. It would be another part of the book, though, that would be more puzzling than that. At the back of the book, a string of letters and lines were scattered among the page, reading this. These sections in particular were of interest due to their seeming ambiguity, though somehow, 70 odd years later, it remains unsolved. Code experts, amateur sleuths across the world, and linguists have attempted to solve it, but to this day, it remains a mystery. It is generally accepted that these letters were a product of the first letter of many different words, and that because of this, it is simply unable to be decoded even with time. With all information in mind, let's get into the possible theories and suspects. June 3rd, 1945. A man lying on a beach in Ashton Park near Sydney was found dead, facing the adjacent Taylor Bay. Strangest of all, a copy of Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam lay on his chest. A now named Joseph Salhai Marshall died a few days before, on May 21st, 1945. His autopsy revealed his death was by poisoning. His edition of the Rubaiyat was the 7th edition, despite the publishing company only having made 5 editions, making his book as rare as the Somerton Man's. It is somewhat believed that the books these men possessed were not books at all, but rather spy gear that was disguised as books, only identifiable as spy gear through their edition, which would prove their non-existence. Shortly following an inquiry into the man's death, a woman named Gwyneth Graham came forward. 13 days later, she would be found dead by suicide. Weirdest of all, the location of Joseph's body would be a 20-minute walk from where Jessica Thompson gave Alfred Boxall her version of the Rubaiyat. Speaking of Jessica Thompson, one theory would be that of the Somerton Man being the father of one of her children. Jessica's older son Robin would be that of scrutiny by University of Adelaide professor Derek Abbott. The Somerton Man had a genetic disorder called hypodontia, which led to 2 front teeth not being able to grow, which is present in 2% of the population. Another genetic trait was present in the Somerton Man's ear, wherein the upper ear hollow was larger than the bottom one, which is also present in 1 to 2% of the population. Both traits were present in Robin Thompson. The chance of this being a coincidence is estimated to be between 1 in 10 million and 1 in 20 million. On July 26, 2022, Derek Abbott, the professor, who is now married to Robin Thompson's daughter and Jessica Thompson's granddaughter, had made a discovery. Along with genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick, Abbott discovered that the Somerton Man was Carl Charles Webb. This discovery was made through the hairs that had been preserved on a plaster mold of the Somerton Man, which linked him to 2 distant cousins he had. Carl had married Dorothy Robertson in 1941, a marriage that would find itself in turmoil more than once. Dorothy would explain that Carl was fascinated with poetry and wrote poems of his own that focused on the subject of death, which he claimed to be his greatest desire. Dorothy also noted how in 1946, Carl would attempt by overdosing on ether, a chemical. Their marriage ended in 1946, when Dorothy fled, and no record of Carl's whereabouts had been taken into account since 1947. In 1951, Dorothy was living a short distance from Adelaide, which Abbott believes to be the reason the Somerton Man found himself in Adelaide, only to find himself in Somerton dead a few hours later. Weirdest of all, Carl's sister, Frida Grace, was married to a man named Thomas Keane. Their son, who died in World War II, had apparently lived in America. Carl and Frida had lived a 20-minute drive away from each other. This would, in theory, explain why the Somerton Man was wearing clothing with the words T. Keane and those of American origin on them. However, this claim is yet to be proven by authorities or other genealogists. Because of this, many still cast doubt on his claims, citing the earlier theory of Robin Thompson, But as of right now, there are no theories that have been proven to be 100% true, leaving this case unsolved.